Thomas Rivera adjusted his worn uniform as he maneuvered his mop across the hallway of Westridge Elementary. The morning bell hadn't rung yet, but several students and their parents were already filtering in, carefully avoiding the wet florins. Him as if both were equally contaminating. "Mommy, why does that man always look so dirty?" a young boy whispered, loud enough for Thomas to hear. The mother pulled her son closer. "That's why you need to study hard, sweetie, so you don't end up like that." Thomas kept his eyes down, focusing on the rhythmic motion of his mop. After 3 years at Westridge, he'd grown accustomed to being treated like furniture present, but unworthy of acknowledgement unless something needed cleaning. At 42, his body carried invisible scars beneath his janitor's uniform. His hands, once steady enough to disarm explosive devices, now gripped a mop handle with the same intensity. The wedding ring on his left hand had dulled with time but remained firmly in place. A testament to a love story abruptly cut short. "Dad!" A cheerful voice broke through his thoughts. Sophia, his 12-year-old daughter, bounded toward him with an energy that momentarily brightened the sterile hallway. "Sunshine," Thomas smiled, the creases around his eyes deepening. "Ready for your science presentation?" "Totally," Mrs. Bennett said. "My volcano model is one of the best she's seen." Sophia's enthusiasm faltered as she noticed a group of girls watching them, whispering behind cupped hands. "That's my girl," Thomas said, pretending not to notice. "I knew staying up until midnight to get that lava formula right would pay off." Warning bell rang, and Sophia's smile dimmed. "I should go. Have a great day, Soph. I'll be here when you finish." As she walked away, Thomas heard one of the girls say, "Your dad's like the school janitor? That's so embarrassing." "Oh, Sophia's." Shoulders tensed, but she continued walking. Principal Harrington strode past, clipboard in hand. "Rivera, the boys' bathroom on the second floor is backed up again. Handle it before first period ends." "No, please. No, thank you. Just an order delivered without eye contact." "Yes, sir," Thomas replied to the principal's retreating back. Later. During his lunch break, Thomas sat alone in the maintenance closet that doubled as his office. He unwrapped his simple sandwich and opened a worn photograph of Sophia as a toddler, perched on his shoulders, with Elena smiling beside them. Picture was taken 3 months before the cancer diagnosis that would claim his wife within a year. "Still keeping us close, huh?" Mrs. Patel, the elderly cafeteria worker, appeared at his door. Thomas quickly tucked the photo away. Some memories are worth holding on to. The shrill ring of an alarm clock jolted Thomas awake at 4:30 a.m. For a fleeting moment, his hand instinctively reached for his rifle before reality settled in. The small 2-bedroom apartment was a far cry from the military barracks or desert outposts where he'd spent his 20s and early 30s. Thomas moved quietly through his morning routine, careful not to wake Sophia. In the bathroom mirror, he traced the faded scar that ran along his jawline, a permanent reminder of the ambush that had nearly claimed his life 8 years ago. Lieutenant Rivera were surrounded. The memory of Private Johnson's panicked voice echoed in his mind. Thomas splashed cold water on his face, washing away the flashback. That day in Kandahar province had earned him a Purple Heart and the enduring respect of his unit. It had also been the day General Williams had first called him the best damn combat engineer in the regiment. As he prepared Sophia's lunch turkey, sandwich, apple slices, and a handwritten note with a joke that would make her smile, Thomas reflected on how drastically his life had changed. Elena's diagnosis had come during his 3rd deployment. He'd been granted emergency leave, arriving home just in time to hear the doctors explain that the aggressive cancer had already spread too far. 6 months later, he was a widower with a 7-year-old daughter who needed him more than his country. "Did Daddy?" Sophia appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "You're thinking about Mom again, aren't you?" Thomas smiled softly. "How'd you guess? You always hum her favorite song when you think about her." Sophia moved to hug him, her small arms barely reaching around his waist. The bus ride to school was quiet that morning. Thomas watched Sophia gazing out the window, reflection showing a girl caught between childhood and adolescence, carrying a maturity forced upon her too early. At school, he began his day in the boiler room, checking systems before tackling his cleaning duties. The basement was his sanctuary, the one place where he could work without enduring judgmental stares. Rivera, Mr. Fleming, the vice principal, called down the stairs. "We need you to set up for tomorrow's fundraiser after your shift." The decorating committee bailed. "Of course," Thomas replied, though he'd promised Sophia they would watch her favorite movie tonight. During his afternoon break, Thomas found himself in the school library, drawn to the military history section. Mrs. Winters, the librarian who treated him with rare kindness, approached quietly. "Found something interesting?" she asked, noticing the book in his hands, a volume about combat engineers in Afghanistan. "Just some old memories," Thomas said, hastily returning the book to its shelf. "You know, my son served over there," she said. "Whenever he visits, he still stands at attention when the doorbell rings." Thomas nodded. "Some habits never leave." He mentioned a lieutenant who saved their entire unit when their convoy hit an IED field. Her eyes studied him with new curiosity. "Was that your division?" Thomas's phone buzzed before he could respond. A text from Sophia. "Can I join?" "Science club. Meeting after school today?" "Your daughter is quite the bright spark," Mrs. Winters commented. "Yesterday she was explaining planetary orbits to a group of 6th graders. Got every detail right." Pride swelled in Thomas's chest. "She gets her brains from her mother, and her resilience from you, I'd wager," Mrs. Winters replied. "Though I wonder why a man with your ... background chose this particular path." Thomas pocketed his phone. Sometimes the most important missions aren't the ones that earn medals. As he returned to mopping the hallways, Thomas caught sight of Sophia in her classroom, confidently answering a question at the board. For her, he would endure 1,000 whispers, 1,000,000 sidelong glances. For her, he had traded in his uniform and medals for a janitor's cart and invisibility. The annual spring fundraiser transformed Westridge Elementary's gymnasium into what Principal Harrington called an evening of refined community engagement, though Thomas knew it was really about wealthy parents trying to outbid each other to impress the school board. For the janitorial staff, it meant an exhausting day of preparations followed by an evening of discreet service. "Rivera, make sure the refreshment tables stay spotless," Harrington instructed, adjusting his bow tie in the reflection of a trophy. "Cason, please try to remain ... inconspicuous." Thomas nodded, already dressed in the black pants and white button-up shirt required for service staff. The outfit was a far cry from his usual uniform, but still marked him as someone to be overlooked. "Dad, how do I look?" Sophia twirled in the modest dress they'd found at a thrift store. Couldn't afford the fancy outfits other girls would be wearing. But Thomas had spent hours meticulously removing stains and mending small tears. "Like the most beautiful girl in the world," he answered truthfully, his heart aching with love and the wish that Alina could see their daughter now. The gymnasium filled quickly with Westridge's most influential families. Thomas moved efficiently. Between tasks, refilling punch bowls and discreetly removing empty plates, occasionally he caught glimpses of Sophia chatting with her science teacher, Dr. Porter, seemingly the only adult besides Mrs. Winters who recognized her potential. "Did you see what the Rivera girl is wearing?" Thomas overheard Mrs. Blackwell, the PTA president, whispering to another mother. "Goodwill chic, I suppose. Though what can one expect with her?" "Situation?" The other woman giggled. "Heard turned down financial assistance for the father-daughter dance last fall. Pride or stubbornness, either way it's the child who suffers." Thomas gripped his serving tray tighter, knuckles whitening. The father-daughter dance was a sore point. He declined the charity not out of pride, but because the suggested donation had been presented with such condescension that it felt like another form of humiliation. The microphone squealed as Principal Harrington took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our most successful fundraiser yet. Tonight, we've already raised over $20,000 toward our new STEM laboratory." Applause rippled through the crowd as Thomas continued his rounds, collecting discarded napkins and plastic cups. "Before we begin our live auction, I'd like to recognize some special contributors," Harrington continued. "The Blackwell family has once again demonstrated exceptional generosity with their $10,000 donation." More applause as Mr. Blackwell waved magnanimously. "And let's not forget our dedicated staff, who make Westridge the premier elementary school in the district. Harrington gestured toward the teachers standing near the stage. Each acknowledged with respectful applause. Then his gaze fell on Thomas, who was emptying a trash can. A smirk crossed the principal's face. And of course, we mustn't overlook our maintenance staff who... will clean up after the rest of us. Laughter rippled through the audience. Thomas froze, suddenly visible in the worst possible way. Mr. Rivera here reminds us all of the importance of education and ambition, wouldn't you say? Harrington continued, his voice dripping with false joviality. Though I wonder, Rivera, what exactly led you to such aspirational employment? More laughter, louder this time. From across the room, Thomas saw Sophia's face crumpled with shame and anger. I mean, surely there's a lesson here for our students. About the importance of applying themselves, Harrington pressed on, clearly enjoying the response from the crowd. Mrs. Blackwell's voice carried across the room. My Warren asked if the janitor lived at the school because he's always here so early and leaves so late. I told him some people just have to work harder to get by. Thomas stood perfectly still, his military training enabling him to maintain a neutral expression despite the humiliation burning through him. He'd faced enemy fire with less fear than he felt now, watching his daughter witness his public degradation. Dad... Sophia had appeared at his side, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Let's just go home. Before Thomas could respond, the gymnasium door swung open. A tall figure in full military dress uniform entered, commanding immediate attention. The crowd parted instinctively, conversations dying mid-sentence. General Marcus Williams stood in the gymnasium doorway, his presence instantly transforming the atmosphere. At 62, he remained imposing, his posture ramrod-straight, chest adorned with rows of medals and ribbons that told stories of valor most civilians couldn't comprehend. The 4 stars on his epaulets gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Forgive my tardiness, the general announced, his voice resonating with natural authority. Traffic from the Pentagon was unforgiving tonight. Principal Harrington nearly tripped. In his haste to greet the unexpected VIP, General Williams. What an extraordinary honor. Had we known you were attending, I received word about your fundraiser for STEM education. General Williams interrupted smoothly. The future of our national security depends on scientific innovation. My aide made a donation in my name. How? Tremendously generous, Harrington gushed, already calculating how to leverage this unexpected connection. Please allow me to introduce our board members and major donors. The general nodded politely but seemed distracted, scanning the room with the practiced eye of someone who had assessed countless tactical situations. His gaze stopped when it reached Thomas, who had instinctively straightened his posture, but kept his eyes lowered. Actually, General Williams said, I believe I see someone I know. The crowd murmured in confusion as the decorated officer strode purposefully across the gymnasium, bypassing the cluster of wealthy donors and heading directly toward the man holding a trash bag. Thomas felt his heart pounding as his former commanding officer approached. 8 years had passed since they'd last stood face-to-face in a military hospital in Germany, where Thomas had received his honorable discharge papers from the general's own hands. Lieutenant Thomas Rivera, General Williams said, his voice carrying throughout the now-silent room. I almost didn't recognize you out of uniform. Sophia looked between her father and the imposing military figure in bewilderment. Thomas set down the trash bag and stood at attention, his muscle memory taking over. General Williams, sir. The general extended his hand. At ease, Lieutenant. It's been too long. Their handshake was firm, bridging the years and vastly different worlds they now inhabited. I don't understand, Principal Harrington interjected, looking between the janitor and the 4-star general with transparent confusion. You two know each other? General Williams turned, his expression hardening slightly. Know each other? Principal Harrington, this man served under my command during 3 deployments. Lieutenant Rivera was the finest combat engineer in the regiment. The whispers began immediately, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Combat engineer? Lieutenant? The janitor was in the military? The general continued, seemingly oblivious to the sensation he was causing. During our second deployment to Kandahar province, our convoy entered an unmarked minefield. We lost 2 vehicles before we even realized what was happening. Thomas wanted to look away, to disappear back into invisibility, but Sophia's hand had found his, anchoring him to the moment. Lieutenant Rivera voluntarily left the safety of his vehicle. General Williams recounted, his voice taking on the cadence of someone delivering a citation. For 4 hours, he cleared a path through that minefield under enemy fire, saving 37 lives, including my own. Mrs. Blackwell's mouth hung open. Mr. Blackwell shifted uncomfortably. He was awarded the Silver Star for his actions that day, the general continued. One of many decorations he earned during his distinguished service. Thomas felt Sophia's grip tighten. He hadn't told her about the Silver Star or many other aspects of his military career. Some memories were too heavy to share with the child, already burdened by her mother's death. "Dad," Sophia whispered. "Is that true?" Thomas nodded slightly, unable to find his voice. General Williams turned toward Sophia with a gentle smile. "And you must be Elena's daughter. The resemblance is remarkable. You knew my mom?" Sophia asked, her eyes widening. "I had the honor of attending your parents' wedding." The general confirmed, "Your mother was a remarkable woman who supported your father through every deployment. She was as much a hero as he was." The gymnasium remained silent, the earlier mockery replaced by stunned disbelief. Principal Harrington looked as though he might be ill. General Williams faced the crowd again, his expression now stern. "In my 40 years of military service, I've learned that heroism isn't always about what you do in battle. Sometimes the greatest courage is found in how a person lives their life after the fighting ends." He placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Lieutenant Rivera could have accepted any number of positions I offered him after his discharge. Instead, he chose to prioritize raising his daughter as a single father, a mission more important than any we undertook overseas." The general's gaze swept over the assembled parents and staff, lingering particularly on those who had laughed the loudest minutes earlier. "In my book," he concluded, "that makes him the finest kind of man and anyone who fails to see that valor might benefit from reassessing their own definition of success." With those words, General Williams saluted Thomas formally. Without hesitation, Thomas returned the salute with perfect military precision. The Monday following the fundraiser, Thomas arrived at Westridge Elementary to find a small potted plant. Outside the maintenance closet, with a card that read simply, "Thank you for your service." By mid-morning, 3 more tokens of appreciation had appeared: a box of homemade cookies, a gift card to the local coffee shop, and a handwritten note from a 5th grader saying his grandfather had also served in Afghanistan. Thomas tucked each item away carefully, unsure how to navigate this sudden shift from invisibility to recognition. The whispers followed him still, but their tone had transformed from derision to curiosity and belated respect. "Mr. Rivera," Mrs. Blackwell called. Out as he mopped near the front office, she approached with uncharacteristic hesitation. Her usual confidence diminished. "I wonder if you might consider speaking to our 4th grade class about your military experience for Veterans Day." Thomas leaned on his mop handle. "I appreciate the invitation, Mrs. Blackwell, but I've never been one for public speaking." "Of course I understand," she replied quickly. And I also wanted to say she lowered her voice. "Warren has been asking about setting up a playdate with Sophia. You're all he talks about since the fundraiser." The irony wasn't lost on Thomas, but he thought of his daughter's limited circle of friends. "I'll mention it to Sophia. It's her decision." In the teacher's lounge, Thomas overheard Dr. Porter discussing a new after-school program. "We need someone with practical engineering experience," the science teacher was saying. "The robotics club needs a faculty advisor who understands structural integrity and circuitry." Thomas slipped past unnoticed, but the seed of an idea had been planted. That evening, as he helped Sophia with her science homework, he broached the subject. "What would you think if I volunteered some time with the robotics club?" he asked casually. Dr. Porter mentioned they need help. Sophia looked up from her textbook, surprise evident in her expression. "You'd do that? But you're always so tired." "After work, think I could manage a few hours a week," Thomas replied. "Might be fun to use those old skills again." That would be ... double quotes. Sophia searched for the right word. Amazing. The following day, Thomas approached Dr. Porter with his offer. The science teacher's enthusiastic response led to a meeting with Principal Harrington, whose demeanor had undergone a remarkable transformation. "We would be honored to have you assist with the robotics program, Mr. Rivera," Harrington said, making deliberate eye contact. "I've been meaning to discuss adjusting your title and compensation to better reflect your previously unknown qualifications." Thomas recognized the olive branch for what it was. "I'm satisfied with my current position, Principal Harrington, but I wouldn't object to some flexible hours to accommodate the robotics club meetings." 3 weeks later, Thomas stood in the science lab, surrounded by eager students clustered around half-built robots. He moved between groups, offering suggestions, with a quiet confidence that felt both familiar and new. "Mr. Rivera," a boy named Jason called out, "is it true you disarmed bombs in the Army?" "I was in a different branch, but yes. Explosive ordnance disposal was part of my training," Thomas answered, noticing Sophia's proud smile from across the room after the session. As they walked home together, Sophia slipped her hand into his something she hadn't done in public since 3rd grade. "Dad, General Williams called yesterday while you were at work," she said. "He invited us to dinner at his house next weekend. Said he has something important to discuss with you." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Did he mention what about? Something about a civilian consultant position with the Corps of Engineers?" Sophia replied, "I wrote down all the details." Thomas fell silent, considering the implications. A position like that would mean better pay, professional respect, and work that utilized his training. But it might also mean longer hours, possibly even travel. "What do you think about that possibility?" he asked his daughter carefully. Sophia considered the question with the thoughtfulness that reminded him so much of Alina. "I think Mom would want you to use your talents," she said finally. "And I'm old enough now that you don't have to choose between your work and me." That evening, as Thomas prepared dinner, the doorbell rang. He opened it to find Mrs. Winters, the librarian, holding a weathered book. "I found this while reorganizing the military history section," she explained, handing him the volume. "A whole chapter about your unit's operations. I thought you might want to share it with Sophia someday." "Thank you," Thomas said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "You know," Mrs. Winters continued, "we're starting a veterans reading program for struggling students. No pressure, but we could use someone with your patience." Thomas felt something unfamiliar unfurling within him, a sense of possibility that had been dormant for years. "I'll think about it." Later, as he tucked the book away on his nightstand, Thomas found himself looking at the photograph of Alina that had accompanied him through deployments and civilian life alike. "You were right," he whispered to her image. It was time to stop hiding. The following morning, as Thomas walked through the school hallways, he noticed something different. People didn't look through him anymore. They saw him. Teachers nodded respectfully, parents offered genuine smiles, and students regarded him with curious interest rather than dismissal. But the most significant change was in himself. For the first time since Elena's death, Thomas Rivera walked with his head held high, no longer burdened by the weight of others' misconceptions or his own reluctance to embrace both parts of his identity: the hero who had saved lives in combat, and the father who had chosen a humble path to save his daughter from further loss. In the end, it wasn't General Williams' public recognition that had truly transformed Thomas's life at Westridge Elementary. It was his own decision to finally allow himself to be fully seen, janitor's uniform, military honors, and all.